So we're going to continue with community, and then during the little bit of time before things were live, then we were talking about something, and I asked you if you were familiar with the Huge-mongous thing.
I am very familiar with Huge-mongous, but not what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a thing that happened apparently like 10 months ago, and when I saw it, it was like only like a day or two old, and I was kind of like, this can't be really happening. This can't be the world we live in right now, and it kind of relates a little bit to what we've been talking about, because you know what we want what we want is to have a lovely day, and a lovely day every day for many, many years. We want to have an awesome and amazing life. That's what we want, right?
Yeah, and Paul, would you like to sometimes comically interact with people?
Well, yeah, I like to tell a joke once in a while, and I have some pretty powerful humor needs, and so I want to have a bit of fun, and I get it that not everybody is into my flavor of humor, and I can work with that by putting on overalls, which generally repels those people. And so then they're far away, and they can't hear me when I say the things I need to say. It all works out. It's lovely. And so I was kind of thinking about how there was a woman taking a video of a man, and the woman and the man are kind of talking, and she apparently asks for his name, and he gets this stupid grin on his face, and he says, Huge-mongous. And then he kind of grins. He's like, he's making a stupid joke, right? It's just a dumb, lame ass, weak joke. And she's like, humongous what? And so she's thinking that it's some sort of like he's saying something mean to her. And so she gets really angry. What's that?
Yeah, and she caught on right away. I think she caught on right away and purposely like just made it crazy. Took it to crazy land. So let me share. So if you go to YouTube, everybody, and just type in Huge-mongous, you'll see this craziness. The first video is the original video, very difficult to watch.
Yeah, don't watch that.
The fourth video, these guys had with the helmets, these guys had a pretty good breakdown of it.
Wow, is that a new YouTube feature where you kind of hover over the images and it kind of plays them a little bit?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, it gives you a little previewy.
Man, that's new. So so I just simply asked. So Josiah has not seen it. I saw it. The point that I wanted to make to Josiah by even mentioning it to him was the idea that she thought that she was videoing a man who was sexually harassing her publicly. It was right after a Seattle City Council meeting, and there's a bunch of people out in the hallway as everybody's like making their way home. And so she starts yelling at him, and she's videoing herself yelling at this man. And then she put the video up on YouTube and on Facebook, and she got a lot of support. Hundreds of people were saying like, you were harassed. That was an awful thing that you had to endure. And when I saw it, I thought, I thought that guy did an amazing job of keeping us cool. He was not harassing anybody. He made a silly joke, and you kind of get the feeling that he didn't really want to say his real name, and he's trying to be friendly, and then when all the hostility was dumped onto him, I thought he was effectively tested in a way to see whether or not he's a lovely person or a horrible person, and I judge him to be a lovely person. And so the video was evidence of him being lovely and the woman being not lovely.
Yes. And I think he was, as it shows this video, it's showing him giving an interview already. And the interviews, it's kind of a touchy subject that he's talking about. So I'm thinking the guy probably just is sick of talking to people about it. Or he's like, I just did an interview and I just talked to the city council and I did an interview and now you want me to do another one. I'm just kind of not into it.
Well, when I brought it up to you, I thought for sure that you had seen it because it seems like everybody has seen it. And but the big thing is, like yesterday, some new footage came out, which is that they released the video of the actual city council meeting, and now you can kind of understand why their conversation went the way that it did. So, all right, the moral of the story, the thing that I want to point out is I think that the larger audience, larger internet audience saw it, the larger internet audience agreed with my analysis, which is, or I should say I agreed with their analysis really, and that is that the woman was behaving poorly and the man was behaving like a superhero. I mean, and in fact, later it came out that the man was kind of a poverty guy and has his own stuff. So there was like an Indiegogo. I think I put in $5, and it got like $42,000 to help this guy. Because it did seem really nice. It just seemed really cool. The guy was really, that was kind of a monstrosity thing that was done unto him, and he showed himself to be such a good person in the face of horrors.
It's the political correctness stuff that's just gone crazy, and I really do think that it's a big part of why we now have Donald Trump as president. People are just sick of the political correctness stuff.
Well, I'm not sure. I can't stand for or against political correctness, because first of all, I'm not a politically correct. The things that come out of my pie hole are not politically correct, okay? But at the same time, I can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so I can't condemn all of that. And then a lot of people are anxious to put their crosshairs onto social justice warriors, and I kind of feel like there's a lot of stuff that is important, and somebody needs to be angry about it. At the same time, I think that this woman was being angry, and it's kind of like an example of like, okay, it would be great if you could direct that anger to things that really do need somebody to be angry, but this man was not part of that.
Well, I think that the political correctness and the social justice warrior stuff and the feminist stuff and all those movements, the whole goal and the reason people wanted it or were okay with it is to bring up equal rights, to make equal rights. And I think we achieved that, and now it's continuing to unequal rights. It's like it's not balanced any longer, or it's getting crazy. People are taking it too far, like what we're seeing here.
We're getting into a major powder keg here, which is like not my battle, not my area of expertise. I do think that I agree with you to an extent. At the same time, I think there are places in the world where there are still very serious problems that need to be dealt with, and at the same time, I think that there's still places here in the United States where there's still problems that need to be addressed. But I also agree that there are places where the guys are getting the shaft. I mean, like, just if you look at education, all guys are like fleeing education. Not all, I shouldn't say all. There are guys, a lot of guys are just not going into education because it's like it's a powder keg of its own, and it's like they're getting accused of awfulness, sexual awfulness that they didn't do, and it's like if you don't have proof, if you're not recording your every interaction constantly, then you could, not only lose your career, but have your life destroyed.
Oh
All
yeah.
because perhaps some 16-year-old girl wants a better grade and you're not going to give it to her. And so she's going to accuse you of horrible things. And you're in our society for that kind of horrible thing. You are guilty until you can prove your innocence, which is not the way it's supposed to work. But then at
Julie
this,
says, sorry.
yeah, click, click,
Julie
boom.
says, good call, Paul. Back away slowly. Data says,
Yeah,
click, click, boom.
yeah. Let's not touch that one. The thing I wanted to say is that I think it's important for people to stand up for what they believe is good and right and decent, and I think that it's, and then when we're talking about community, then it's kind of like, and you look at something about like this video of these two people interacting, it's kind of like, well, having those two people in the same community clearly isn't going to work out. And so, you need to find ways to be able to, like, how do we desperately need a recipe to make it so that it's simple and easy and awesome for people that are keen on permaculture or community to come together. And I kind of feel like that's part of what I am trying to do. I think a lot of people are trying to solve the intentional community problem.
Well, and then I think that's a big reason why intentional communities are created. It's so that those two people can have their own group of people that are like that they're integrating with and share the same views
And their own support networks. In this particular case, it sounds like that woman had a pretty massive support network already that was glad to support her, and he did not. He was just a lone guy, and but he ended up getting a massive support network as people saw the video.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Great thing about the internet.
So I've got my notes here. In fact, you wanted me to. So sometimes we do the share screen thing. Let's see if I can.
Yeah, do the share screening thing so I can keep up with what you're talking about. Now, I will say, Paul, every once in a while I'll stop sharing screen because I was watching the video from the last one and it's all like just people looking at this and your little window in the corner. Or
all right.
In the corner, so.
All right. Well, and I mean, it's I'm going to stop sharing the screen because it is pretty dull. I mean, it's just a bunch of text. But all right, I'm here at my place. I can't remember what all we talked about last week, which kind of shows, man, I must be getting old. I can't remember all the things we talked about last week. But I do want to say that I gave up a career in an effort to accomplish a lot of permaculture stuff, and I'm so extremely passionate about that. And not everybody is. That's all right. But I'm trying to be an incubator for flavors of community, as well as an incubator for flavors of permaculture, different kinds of things that people might try to do in seed and soil. I think a lot about a lot of the different communities that I have visited over the years, dozens of communities, and the ones that I like the best, and how I want to try and see if I can get that going. And so rather than being a person in the community that's trying to build my own thing, and then maybe someday other people will come, I've been focusing on like trying to facilitate having dozens of people come, and I don't know of anybody else in the permaculture world that's doing that. I do know that there are lots of intentional communities that are happening throughout the world. You go to ic.org and you can see all of that.
We're starting up one. Permaethos 3.0 is all about community and building community, or at least starting the discussion on how to build the type of community that our audience is interested in. And that's called, it's codenamed Thrive Through. And so we're also beginning that into that stage as well. We're not to the point where you're at, where you have the property, a property, and you actually have people coming and living. It's like you're getting the brunt of it, and we get to learn from everything that happened in the call.
From my suffering. Okay. All right. All right. So I think that there's a lot of people all over the United States that have 100 acres, 300 acres, something in that arena. And they're willing to have people that they like come and do things. And it's like, and they're open to the idea of like, you could come and be here for a year or 2 years or 20 years. These are things that right now I'm open to. I just have a few quirks. If you're willing to put up with my quirks, I'm willing to work a deal with you to be here and live and try permaculture things. I like I think that there could be right now 2,000 people with enough property to facilitate something like this, but they don't. I mean, nobody wants the drama. Everybody wants all the upside. So they want something that's going to last. They want something where the upsides are 10 times bigger than the downsides.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, and another thing is that people that would be interested maybe not be interested because they don't want to give up the control that they have over their property. Like, it's their property. They don't like the idea of other people living on their property and getting to make decisions about pieces of their property, or maybe not agreeing with their philosophies and not bending to the will of the person who started the community and wanted it a certain way.
Well, I like the, I mean, let's suppose for a moment that your philosophies in permaculture were the same as mine. Now I've already got property, and I'm saying like, okay, no plywood, very little glue and paint and cement, definitely no pesticides of any kind, and I'm trying to find ways to be better, and I don't know what that means entirely. It's going to be a work in progress between you and I and 20 other people over the years. And all I can say is that I want to do something that's better based on my standards. And if you've listened to all of my podcasts, you probably have a pretty good idea what my standards are like. But if you come and you say like, I only agree with 10% of what you have to say, well then don't come. But if you're like, I agree with, I haven't heard a thing I don't agree with, then it would be like, you could come down and it would probably be a smooth thing for a very long term. Probably. I mean, there will definitely be things that we end up not agreeing about, and it could be whether or not what your stance is on social justice warriors, or what did you say, political correctness, and it's like my position might be different from yours, but I think that's something that could be not a showstopper. Yeah. Now the trade-off is like, let's say you want to go get your own property and you want to have total control. And it's like, okay, so you went from my very restrictive set of what you're allowed to do to a different restrictive set of what the government says is okay for you to do. And then there's like being able to do anything you want.
There's freedom. There's not so free, and then there's not free at all.
Well, and it's like, on the other hand, if you're like in here where I am, this is my stuff, right? I've made it so that way there's like this subset. But part of what I've done is I've said you do not have the freedom to use pesticides,
right?
And you do not have the freedom to use plywood. You do not have the freedom to use a list of toxic ick. I have a bunch of things that are not part of the freedom package. And so It's like an HOA but different, and it's like, but you know, if these are things that strike you as like that's just stupid, then you would be like, I'm not going to go there then.
Right.
I mean, that's, and at the same time, if there are 2,000 different properties, surely there'll be like 20 that you really like, and you can pick which one of the 20 that you like. But
Right.
then 2,000 different property owners, they're kind of like, I don't want to do this because I don't want to get into the crazy drama shit.
Or there isn't a system laid out that we could use, or that I could use and I trust and is reliable to implement a intentional community.
That has a track record.
Right, right.
You know, like you could go there, and like when I visited all these different communities, I would end up at a community and I'm like, okay, how long have you been here? I've been here 3 months. Okay, who's been here the longest? That guy over there. He's been here 1 year and 4 months, and he's looking for the door. And it's like, okay, probably not the best. Oh, Dana Martin is on the 256th podcast of Paul, and she's loving them, as opposed to suffering. I think if you're going to suffer, you'd give up like early on in the first one.
But to listen to that many, you're loving it for sure. Like you might like it and listen to 10 or 20.
No, I think there's people that listen to my podcast just to have something to be angry about.
Oh, okay. That's
yeah.
Sure.
Every time a podcast comes out, they listen to it, and then they go out somewhere on the internet and they post about how angry they are about this dumb fuck Paul Wheaton. And it's like, your world revolves around my world. This is how you define your existence and how angry you are at me. Okay, that's an interesting choice.
All right. So back to the community thing. Let's say there's a list. We have a list of 1,000 things that are or are not acceptable. Like we know these are not acceptable.
Okay.
So we created this list.
All
now,
right.
Would you like to join? And then at the bottom there is the caveat of plus, like things might come up that that I'm like trying, and it might work, it might not. You might hate it, you might not. Just so you know. Now, I think the list of 2,000, that's very cut and dry and easy for people to understand and make a decision on. It's that bottom one, that last one, where things come up, right? Because they're going to look at that the hard set rules and say that's acceptable, I can go with that. And then there's that one where, okay, this is where I know my freedom range is because I have this hard set rules. I know what kind of freedom I'm going to have or what kind of freedom I will not have. And then there's the last one where it's like, I'm not sure whether, but I've listened to the podcast and I pretty much agree with what Paul's saying, so I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
And then they come, and then all of a sudden, something that Paul decides is personal to that person, and they don't agree with it.
Right.
And that's when, like, the social justice crazy stuff comes out, or whatever, or the, you know, that kind of reaction kind of stuff could happen.
I mean, if it's going to be the warrior part of social justice, and it's like, and I am considered the man, and so then they're going to, like, you know, bring hostility to me on my land. I don't want to see that happen, which is why I think that it's like, you know, I like what Diana Leaf Christian says, is like, make it difficult to get in and easy to get out. Yeah. And so but I would like to think that, you know, for what we're doing, wouldn't people appreciate that we're trying to build a beautiful permaculture future? Even if they come here and they say, I've decided that it's not for me. I've decided to go back to school. I've decided to go
bow out. Sure.
Then it seems like that they would want to not burn the bridge, and that they would want to make a graceful exit and not destroy the community on the way out.
Unless they feel or are supported by other members with the same feelings, right? Because now you're in this position where like, okay, nobody agrees with me, I can bow out. Or you're in a position where like, there's like a group of people that feel the same way as me, and I'm not this isn't just all about me. It's about a bunch of people. So we need to defend the chivalry comes out, right? I need to defend these other people that are feeling the same way.
Hi. Well, okay. I'm kind of feeling like the thing is that community is already going to be challenging, and we want to be able to have the community last for 20, 40 years, 100 years, whatever. And we want to have a lovely day every day. And it seems like when you're living in proximity with other people and the level of interaction is higher, because like you could just go and rent a house or buy a house in Seattle, for example, and then you're in a neighborhood now. And so you have neighbors, but you don't ever talk to them because that's just how it is generally. Now there is the whole city repair project where it does encourage people to communicate with their neighbors. And you do get to know your neighbors a bit. And that's a wonderful, lovely thing. Kind of the exception rather than the rule, but you get to know your neighbors to some degree. And sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes not so much. But if you're going to bring out the label intentional community, which by the way, IC.org, that's how they define intentional community. The only ingredient you need to be able to call your site an intentional community is the willingness to call it an intentional community. So if you say this is an intentional community, it totally is. That's it. That's the whole thing, for better or for worse. Now, the important thing is that when you're going to interact with enough people, it's a delicate thing. Everybody who's there has all the tools they need to utterly and completely destroy the community at all times. And so it's like, you know, just like if you own a gun and you live in community, you have the tools that you need to shoot everybody in the head that you live with. Now, of course, that would be very rude.
Yeah, I think, and I think there might be some repercussion from the rest of the community.
Well, unless they're all dead. So I'm not, and I hope I'm not painting a picture of a strategy for anybody. So, but the thing is that is an unkind thing. I mean, it's hard to build community. It's hard to maintain community. It's hard to have a lovely day every day. And all it takes is one person having an off day to really destroy things for weeks for the community. And they can say, if everybody's together, they can say one mean and hurtful thing in 15 seconds, which will really destroy everything for weeks.
And part of the great thing about intentional community is that you get to know everybody, and communication's easy and great. And so if it spreads like wildfire very quickly. So
the mission is how do we have 10 times more upsides than downsides? There's going to be downsides. There's no way around it. There's going to be disagreements. There's going to be struggles. There's going to be, but it's like, and the reason why the other communities don't last is because the downsides end up outweighing the upsides. And so, I mean, number one on the list has to be to be decent. I mean, really, be decent. If you start to disrespect others, or if you start to be mean to others, I think that's the thing that, I mean, that 15 seconds of being mean poisons the community for weeks. It takes weeks for the community to recover from that. And so it's kind of like we need to come up with something for that. And it's like, okay, that's still part of the design is to try to find a way to encourage the members of your community to be respectful to this delicate thing that is so beautiful and joyous.
And this is why the pioneers of intentional community are so important, the ones that have come before us and us ourselves. I mean, it's still a pioneer kind of thing, even though intentional communities have been happening for thousands of years in our modern society. In our modern society, it is a new thing, or like something that people just aren't used to. It hasn't been around for so long.
Well, now, a lot of people kind of look into the whole space of like, I'm going to go out and get myself 10 or 20 acres and I'll go buy it and I'll buy something with a house on it already. So you're looking at $200,000 to $1 million. And it's like, okay, so like, let's say I go and I get a mortgage. You're not going to get one. Land, it's very difficult to get a mortgage, but let's say you did. Then it's like, okay, now you got to come up with like $1,500 a month to pay your mortgage. And it's like, So now, you know, you thought you were doing this freedom package, but it's like, okay, now I got to get land that's close to a city. And now the price of the land went up by a factor of 4. And now my mortgage payment went up. And so it's kind of like, what's that?
Plus taxes.
Sure. Yeah. The thing is that the task becomes more and more difficult, more and more challenging. The word impossible might even be thrown out a couple of times. And so, and then you start coming back to the idea of like, well, if I could go in on buying property with 2 or 3 other people, but then you get to that whole issue of like, how are the decisions made? And then you get to the horizontal decision-making processes. Now, of course, I know you're a fan of holacracy, and it's like I want to set that aside for a moment, and I'm trying to, because part of what I'm trying to say is like, if you want to get an acre of deep roots here, I'm saying that getting an acre of deep roots here is kind of like getting, you know, you get an acre and at the same time you get like 200 acres. So if you want to, you know, do a paddock ship system with cattle, you kind of have the whole 200 acres to do that. And now you're talking about $21,000 for an acre of deep roots. And then of course you need to have some kind of, you know, lovely home built. And then hopefully it'll be closer to your standards if you're coming here than if you went and got a conventional home of some sort. It becomes far more plausible for people to come up with. I mean, if you're going to do $21,000 for deep roots, and maybe you're going to put $20,000 into a lovely home that you're going to build yourself, and then you're going to, for the first couple of years, you need some buffer to live on while you're getting set up, and so maybe you've got another $20,000. Then it's a $60,000 thing. Where you can accumulate your $60,000 in town, you know, with your current job or whatever before you head out, and then you're mortgage free, you're debt free, and you don't have to have a job anymore. There's no further need for a job. So and then eventually your systems come up to speed. And then you have an income stream again. Or it's even possible that part of what you do is to build some residual income streams before you make the leap, etc. I mean, on and on and on and on. All right. The key is that I'm trying to create something where it's easier to get into. And for some people, I mean, the other thing is that we had somebody who bought a deep roots package, and then stuff happened in their lives, and they had land, and so then they wanted to sell it. So they bought 2 acres here for $20,000 when we very first offered acreage here, and then I believe that they sold it for $26,000. So so they made money on selling it. So if somebody could come here, and if it doesn't work out, then it's possible that they could, you know, resell it.
So just a quick question on your system. When they resell it, are there restrictions on who they can resell it to? You get to make that decision.
Oh yeah. No, in fact, it's entirely my decision. And so, but you know, I was totally cool with it. I got nothing out of the transaction or anything like that. But we do have requirements on what, you know, so you have to listen to at least 200 podcasts before you're allowed to, we call it, put your stake in the ground. You're not allowed to turn soil. You're not allowed to build anything, you know, for yourself. until you've listened to at least 200 podcasts. And, you know, we sit down and we have a chat about, like, does this seem like it's going to work for you, kind of. So there are requirements, there are limitations. And I imagine that as time passes, it'll get more challenging to get something here. I mean, that's another thing that I think is important, and was brought up during the PDC, is that when a community is starting with raw land, it's like 50 times easier to get in. And then once you have the natural swimming pool and the water going back and forth, and there's a 20 different gardens from all these different people and things like that, then it gets challenging to be able to get in. And then everybody wants in. I show up.
The hard part's been done.
Yeah. So this is the time to start, to begin. And I know that right now on the lab, there's at least one plot where it's a rental plot, and they've got improvements. And for $1,500, you get a small cabin with heat. So, somebody could do that, whether they want to rent the plot year to year, or they want to, do the deep roots thing. All right, so trying to make it so it's far easier to get into than if you went and bought your own land, because the price of raw land is pretty high.
Yeah, and you don't get the community aspect. I mean, that's the big seller, is that you're going to be in this community of like-minded individuals.
Well, and community comes in many flavors. There can be community where you're in a small structure of your own right next door, 200 feet away from another structure where their values are very similar to your own values. And then you meet once or twice a week to visit and gather and talk, or maybe some people meet twice a day. It's like, so there's that level of community. But I think the big thing is like, do you want a natural swimming pool? Because that's a big project. And how often would you use a natural swimming pool? Like during the summer, would you go and be in it every day? Or would you be in it, once a week, once a month? But and then if you build a little one or a big one, but it's like, if you've got 20 people in your community, then in a way it ends up being like, I got a natural swimming pool and it was 95% off, that kind of thing. And so, and that, similar sorts of things for large pieces of art, or a shared community center. Or if you want to have a guest bedroom, there could be like a guest structure available. And so then all of the things that you want to have could be had, but it's like easier to do. I want to say just real quick that what I'm seeking for this particular property is something that's a bit of a bike-ped community. So like eventually all of the vehicles will all be relegated to the inn next to the gate. I think one of the things when we were talking about what are the perks of community, we didn't talk about music, joy, and laughter. A lot of the communities I've been to, there was generally music at least every other night. And I think that here there's been a lot of that as well. And a lot of wonderful community-ish stuff, the music, joy, and laughter. The other thing is like, let's say you're going to go buy your own property and you're bonkers about permaculture and you want to do all the things. You kind of have to read hundreds and hundreds of books, and then you need to be an expert in like 40 different things. As opposed to when you're in community, maybe you've read a dozen or 2 dozen books, and you're a pretty good expert in like 1 or 2 things. So it's so much easier. More of your life can be devoted to enjoying life rather than, having to make things work.
And it's much more in line with what people already have or know. Like most people only have 1 or 2 skills that they're very good at. It's how they've existed. It's their job. And so it's much more in line and easier to get in than having to know 20 skills or more.
All right. Some people in a community are going to do more stuff. They're like 60 hours a week kind of people, and then they're probably going to, because of that, have more stuff. They're going to have a prettier, fancier structure, a bigger structure, etc. And then there's going to be some people who can be comfortable living very humbly, and they enjoy the socializing and watching the clouds pass and drinking in life, and they don't much
until winter comes. Grasshopper.
I think that, you know, if you have a humble little structure and you've got your gardens set up permaculture style,
yes, then you can do it.
All you can do is preserve your food and each year, and keeps you going. I think it's not a bad path to travel.
Sure, but you got to do the ant thing first. You got to be the ant before you can try and replicate what the grasshopper's doing.
I think it's possible that in the next couple of years we're going to start seeing plots at Wheaton Labs where a person can buy the stuff on the plot and they're ready to go. Yeah. And it's like the garden's already growing, the fence is up, little humble structure, and then maybe over the next 10 years you might build a nicer structure if that's what you're into. But you work at precisely your own pace, as opposed to like, oh, I gotta do this, I gotta do that kind of pace.
Yeah. So I think that's a great idea. So I guess there's two ways you could go about it. Let's say you're starting a community. One could be that it's raw land, or three ways. One is that it's raw land. You're just getting raw land. Whenever someone new comes, they get raw land, and they can build up however they want to do it. Those are going to be the hardcore people. It's going to be difficult times, and it's going to be a lot of work. Then there's the other method where it's like, I built these structures, and I pick which one you want. It's got a garden, it's got a place for livestock, it's got a little house for you. You know, it's got the necessities there for you already. And then there's the third method, which is that transition method, where it started out as raw land. We started the community with raw land, and as we could, we built those structures so that people would come in and live there. And so we can make that opportunity for people where they get the choice of picking which land they want to live on. So the big question is, if number 3 is the way you're going, where you want that, I want to start with raw land because it's inexpensive. I can get it done. It's less expensive, I should say. And I can get started. And eventually I would like it so that we have all these plots that are fairly well established and people can just choose which one they want and jump right into the community for a higher price, probably.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you get to that? How do you accomplish that transition?
I'm still trying to discover it. I know that here, I mean, we started with raw land, so the only option available was for people starting with raw land. Now we're to the point where we have one plot where the guy has an advertisement on Permies right now saying, do you want to buy my cabin? Do you want to buy my improvements to this plot? So it's on an acre. And so he's got a little cabin, he's planted some food, he's got like a little shed. And so then that's available. I still think his plot needs more fence, and you probably want to do a lot more gardens. And then it's possible that there might be another plot available that has fence and gardens and structure. So, but
one way I was thinking that it could be done, because I've been thinking about this since visiting, and maybe one way to do it is, you start out with your raw land and you get a bunch of people on, and you're really going to find those couple of people that are doing kick-ass jobs. Like, they're building shit, they're getting shit done. And then you have another section of land, which was not available previously, which instead of 1 acre is 5 acre plots that are raw land. And then you offer that to those that are kicking ass. So those kick-ass people, the people that are motivated and can will replicate and can do this again on the 5 acres, you offer them those plots, and that way it frees up those previously built plots for a much higher, steeper price, because at that point all the other plots are taken, but it's a steeper price to get into the community at the 1 acre level. And
so
then
what you're saying is that I could do something where it's like, okay, dude, give me your improvements on your plot, and then I'll give you a different acre plus more acres in exchange for your improvements.
Right.
I suppose that that's a plausible path. At this moment, what I would do is to say that, you know, first you make an arrangement with me for an acre. So like, let's say you're coming and you want something that's here. Then it's like, okay, so you're going to deal with me for your acre and whether or not you're allowed to come here. Like, have you listened to 200 podcasts?
Right.
And then you're going to go and decide whether you're going to do raw land and pick a plot that way or buy somebody's improvements. So there could be a guy and he's made a bunch of improvements, but he's like, I'm going to go back to school. And so you can then negotiate with him for his improvements.
Sure.
Now, let's suppose that somebody is like done something that I think is harmful to the community. In that case, I'd be like, you're all done here. You're heading down the road. And then I might say, because the deal that we have is that all of the improvements, it's stated, all of the improvements that anybody makes belong to me. And so, and it's like, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, no, if you're being a lovely person, then no, you go ahead and try and see how much you can get for that. And I'll, you know, work a deal with you depending on how lovely you are. And it's like, I think that's all that we've done so far. I haven't, like, you know, gone to anybody yet and said, all your shit is mine because that's our deal. So far, it's all been like, and you can, you know, you can sell it. You go ahead and try and sell your improvements. I didn't buy those materials. I didn't put all the work in there.
Yeah. You
go right ahead. I have the right to say it's mine. Get the fuck out. But you know, I think that if I do a lot of that, that's going to lead to, you know, not an unwholesome community. But if somebody's like being awful, and they need to go, then it's like they need to go. If somebody's destroying the community or who knows what, something awful and bad. On the other hand, I kind of think that if because I have this ability, I think a lot of people are being lovely. It's like, well, I was going to lose my shit and do awful and horrible things, but I decided not to because then I could get myself kicked out. You know, I could be on the road in 24 hours.
Right.
So I don't want that. I wanna, you know, plan my exit. So I'm gonna be a decent person. So, all right. Did I answer your question there?
No.
Okay. Hit me again with the question.
I'm thinking of a methodology of building community, and the problem I see is that there's people that want. What I would love to do is have a community where everything's built. There's great shit for people to come into. It's an easy transition, and they go into the homesteading lifestyle with the house already and all of that pre-built, where they can make changes, whatever changes they want, but they can live and be happy, get through the winter, all of that stuff. But to get there, I don't have the money to just have all this shit built. And so if I open up, let's say, to make it easy, we'll just say there's half the property is 1 acre plots, half the property is 5 acre plots. Those 5 acre plots are not available. You can get a 1 acre plot of raw land. So then I fill up those 1 acre plots of raw land. Some people are kicking ass and building all kinds of stuff and doing a great job. Like, they're obviously ants. They're the hardcore. And then some people are just like playing the flute, watching the clouds, leaving for the winter or whatever. They're not the hardcore. Now, they're still fine and happy in the community, and that's fine. But they're not the hardcore. So now I've got all these plots, they're full, and now I got people that want into the community very badly because it's a well-established community. I've got all these 1 acre plots full of happy people. So now I can offer the people that have been kicking ass, the ants, a 5 acre plot, because I know that those people are kick-ass people. So I offer them a 5 acre plot. So they came in, they bought for $20,000 their 1 acre plot. And I've got this $50,000 5 acre plot. I will give you the $50,000 5 acre plot. And thanks because you're awesome. Now this 1 acre plot turns into a $50,000 plot or a $60,000 plot or whatever. So I can get the more community members in, and I'm hopefully growing the amount of kick-ass, hardworking people in the community. That's an idea that came to me.
Okay. I think things are not cut and dried enough. I mean, like, let's say you've got 2 people that are pretty kick-ass, and but on the scale of kick-assitude, like, you've met people that are bringing more kick-ass to the table, and so you're kind of thinking like, well, one of these people is like 30% of kick-ass, and the other one is 20% of kick-ass. And so, like, let's say you've decided to give 2 acres to person number 1, and you kind of are thinking to yourself, on person number 2, maybe in another year I'll do something for them.
Mm-hmm.
But person number 2 is kind of like, the fuck? I do more than that guy. Why does he get all the fucking candy and you fuck me, huh? And it's like, oh no. So, I mean, and the other thing is like, okay, now, person number 1 has moved on to more acreage, and then so now you've got this acre that's like ready to go. It's a turnkey kind of a thing. Now it's your responsibility to keep it maintained until it is sold. How long does it take until it's sold?
Well, if at that point, like before I'm offering up these 5 acres or whatever, the larger pieces, I have a full community, and it's established community. This is what you're talking about with, it's harder to get into those well-established good communities. And so a lot of people want in, and you get to be picky on who gets in. Because the big thing that we want to accomplish with these communities is having the ability where people can live and work and share with other people's skills, right? And because you want to be surrounded by people that are doing a kick-ass job like you're doing. And I don't want to raise the cattle and do the woodwork. I want to do the woodwork, and I want them to raise the cattle, and we trade with each other. You want that community.
Or you trade with actual American dollars, But the thing is to be surrounded by people who have a value set that's similar to yours. So maybe you'll sell your woodwork elsewhere or to other people in the community, and then you'll buy their beef or their raw milk or something like that. And so, but yeah, you want to have that kick-ass element, and it's kind of like, and what happens if you don't have exactly what's in your imagination? And it's like, then what happens? So I don't know. I kind of feel like, so the model that I have right now is, I think, pretty good, but I think you're thinking of possibly something else. Like, you want to do something that's a little bit different. But what I have right now is like, okay, you want to come and be part of this. That's cool. Here's, the different things. You've got like being an ant. I could just rent you whatever plot you want. And then there's also the whole concept of deep roots. And I think deep roots is really the thing we want to, have people do. And then they say, okay, I want something where there's already something for me to live in. I don't want to live in a tent while I build. I want to, whatever. So then they visit with the people who have built those and see if they can make an arrangement. Because that's the other thing too, is I kind of feel like somebody builds something on their plot and they're like, okay, now I want 15 grand for this. And I kind of look at it and I kind of think, I don't think you're going to get anybody to pay more than $500. You know, it's okay to want 15 grand. Just want away. Just, you know, but you know, we might bring in 8 people this year, and maybe one of them be willing to pay $500, but nobody is going to want to pay more than $500 for that.
And they're going to go, well, if you would just allow me to sell it to anybody, someone would want to buy it for 15 grand. You're fucking me.
Well, okay, yeah, they could say that, and from that perspective, I am totally fucking them. But they knew I was going to fuck them from the beginning in that way. So,
yep.
I kind of feel like so there's some of that stuff too, where on 2 days a week they feel like, oh yeah, it's worth about $500, but then some days they're like, you know what, I just need to grow some balls and demand 15 grand for what I made. It was my first ever. And part of what I really want to do is to move to the next plot over and build something better. Because
fuck this up.
That, oh shit, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
So I learned a lot on that. I'm glad I'm not going to live there anymore. So, and I'd love to have 15 grand to build my next thing. Yeah, something like that. All right. So anyway, this is the system that I have now, and I do think that we'll come up with some better systems. And there's the whole thing of the boot camp program, where a person can come and spend 21 months in the boot camp program, and then they get their acre of deep roots. Yep. So, all right. We've got 2 minutes left.
Yes. Let's hear, can we kind of sum up what we talked about and talk about next week? And by the way, guys, we're on iTunes. You can, if you don't want to watch us and join live and all that, you can go on iTunes and listen to us in your car. iTunes, just search Permaculture Smackdown. We'll pop right up. And also on Google Play and all that stuff. We're on podcasts. Podcast is available. Thrivethrough.com is the Permethos 3.0 website where you can request to join. You can't join yet. And permies.com, where you can see all kinds of stuff that we're talking about in the forums, and all kinds of great articles by Mr. Paul Wheaton, who is my co-host. So what did we talk about? What's next week?
Patreon.com/Paul Wheaton is the one that I have, where we give you the keys to be able to be part of the chat. And I'm looking over here at the chat, and I can see, Julia's comment where, and I read it earlier, where she listened to the podcast while making her big life transition. And then she and her fam stopped by here, and they've been here a couple of times now. But awesome. Her daughters knew my voice when they impressed. They probably knew what they were getting into by the time that they arrived. I remember playing cards with her kids. But yeah, patreon.com/Paul Wheaton is mine. We didn't make it very far along on my list of stuff to talk about. And it's like, it is amazing how the intentional community thing is so massive. And I feel like a lot of people will hear us talking about community and they won't understand the value of it, because most people have left community because of the drama. They were in a budding community of sorts, probably in college or probably shortly after high school, and what they learned is that was too much drama.
Or a fucking HOA. I hate HOAs.
Right. Yeah. But you think about it, like an HOA says everybody's house has to be painted the exact same color or something like that. You can't have a purple house. It's all beige, man. It's all beige. And everybody has to maintain the lawn exactly the same in front of their house, because that's what we're into. That's how we roll. And it's like, imagine being in an HOA where the values are made up by me or by you or somebody else who you know pretty well because they have hundreds of podcasts, you know, so you've got a good idea of what you're getting into. And you're like, this is great. This is what I want. And this is how I want to live all the rest of my life because everything else is so horrible. I want to be someplace where everybody is going to do hugelkultur. I want to be someplace where people avoid cement and paint and glue. I want to be someplace where like the toxicity of the area is just really low because everybody has these powerful values. So it's kind of like, yeah, an HOA of sorts.
Yeah, well, it's a different view on HOAs than the typical current HOA. All right, man, we're over time. We'll see you guys all next week. Thanks for showing up, and we had a blast. Let us know in the comments on Facebook and tv.permethos.com. Let us know if you enjoyed this topic or what other topics you'd like to talk about.
Bye.
Bye-bye.